Exactly. I've been everywhere, man. Remember that song? So, good morning. We've had quite a day. AJ Hall, producer, and I, we're going to go down to the border. We went down to Texas, right? To McAllen, Texas, Rio Grande Valley on Tuesday. We were up late Wednesday night, almost to midnight, as Border Patrol heroically pursued to catch illegal crossers, took us into these bushes. It was very difficult. And then we took a red eye to San Diego to get out there for the president, and we took one back. And so I just landed about 70 minutes ago, and here I am. So if I fall asleep, I apologize.
I saw someone bringing a suit to you, so you had something to wear for the show.
He ran in full speed. He was like, "I'm here."
This is what the job calls for.
But it's true. But Griff, you're doing work that no other journalist, reporter will do or has done. And to your credit, you've gotten the real story at the border, and you got a big interview.
Big interview.
We did. President Trump, I presume, wanted to speak with me and accepted our invitation because he knows we've covered the border so much. And the story of this border is a historical one because it isn't individual mails from Mexico like it was a decade ago.
Yeah.
These numbers are unprecedented because of these family units. It's having an impact on the fabric of America, not just the borderline down in the south. I asked him about it. Take a listen. Mr. President, aside from the wall, and I just came from McAllen, Texas, Rio Grande Valley,
right.
They're getting hit so hard from coast to coast. All the Border Patrol chiefs tell me, in addition to the wall, they need Congress to roll their sleeves up and to change these laws.
Griff, we could change these laws in 15 minutes. I could change them, catch and release. You know what that is, Democrats.
Yes,
you catch the person, you take their name and you release them, okay?
Right.
And we're not doing that anymore, and it's just a horrible thing. Chain migration, where you come in and you have you have a lot of people come in with you. Your mother, your father, your uncle, your aunt, your grandmother, your grandfather, your brothers and sisters. And I mean, we had a case where somebody that, as you know, radical Islam, he ran ran many people down on the West Side Highway in New York. You know it well.
Right.
And killed 8 people, wounded, horribly injured 12 people. I mean, missing arms and legs. And he has many people under chain migration. Many of his relatives have come in with him. It's crazy. And then, of course, you have the lottery, visa lottery, where they pick them and they pick people. And these countries aren't giving us their finest, okay? They're not giving us their finest. I'm not going to say they give us their worst, but, you know, why wouldn't they? So we have to get rid of these things, and we can have it so easy. What has happened, though, and you've seen it, is Mexico now, for the first time, is apprehending people and bringing them back with, and this is, otherwise we're going to close up the border.
Are any Democrats willing to work with you to change the laws?
Well, we're going to find out. I think they're getting hurt badly politically, and then once they get hurt badly politically, they'll start working with us. In the meantime, Mexico is doing a job that we could be doing, but Mexico is now apprehending people at their southern border,
right,
and they're bringing them back to Honduras or Guatemala or wherever they come from, El Salvador. They're also stopping the Mexicans from coming in. And we've had a great 4 days, and it only started when I said we're going to close the border. And I will close the border, or I'll put the tariffs on the cars that they make and they send into our country essentially tax-free. And I'll put tariffs on there, and then I'll close the border after that if that doesn't work.
So let's address that. How would you put a tariff on it when your own agreement precludes that?
Well, we haven't finished our agreement yet. So I'll put that in there. I'm going to put it in there because if they, look, people are pouring through Mexico. They come from other countries. I already stopped the money. We pay them over $500 million. Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and others. We stopped the money. Some people would say, oh, you should give them more money. The Democrats say give them more money. They're forming caravans to get people out.
I've been in them.
And you know what? They're not putting their best people in those caravans, okay? But they're forming caravans, they're putting people in, they're sending them up. You know it better than anybody. You know what's going on.
So, Mr. President, is it time to call for a summit between yourself, the President of Mexico, the Presidents of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador?
I don't need a summit. I think we've done very well without the summit. They understand. We stopped. We're saving $550 million. And I respectfully told, and I thank him very much, because for the last 4 days it's been great. You see that whole stream is drying up. They could stop them at their southern border. And you look at what's happening now. They pulled in 1,500, 1,500 yesterday. They brought them back. They pulled in over 1,000 the day before, over 1,000 the day before that. Today I haven't gotten the number, but I understand it's a lot.
Where I was in RGV, 14 straight days of 1,000 plus, 1,400 yesterday. And this is what I want to address with you. They're releasing now, particularly the family units, to the public. In the fabric of the U.S., tens of thousands are being released and will continue. Are we witnessing the second generation of DACA forming?
No, we're witnessing people that are going to be brought out of the country. The country is full. Our system is full. We can't do it anymore. We go by this horrible Flores situation. You know, that decision is a horror show. We have to release after 20 days. And we built big detention areas, but they fill up immediately. There's never been so many people coming up, and that's because they're gaming the system, and the system has changed for the worse because of what happened with Democrats and what they've done in terms of Congress. So if we change the laws, it would be very easy. But in the meantime, Mexico, if they stop the people from coming in, we won't have a lot of people coming at the border.
News today, your nominee for ICE Director, Ronald Vitiello, 30 years in the job. Why did you withdraw his nomination?
Because we may go a different way. We may have to go a very tough way, and we're going to see, and we'll see. Ron's a good guy. I know him well. He's done a good job, but we may just go a different way, a little bit tougher.
Tough question for you. Since you've done so much on immigration and made it a central issue, we may end up, by your administration's own projections, upwards of 1 million undocumented immigrants added to the existing population. What does that say about your administration's handling?
I think what happened is I've proven to be right. If we were able to build the wall, now I've gotten the money for the wall, and you take a look at this. I hope you're covering it, because we have miles and miles of it being built right now. Hundreds of miles are under construction, and more importantly, they're under contract. I think 157 miles right now is under contract. They're getting ready to start. The Rio Grande, we're doing a lot of work there. That's where a lot of people come in. And I've shown the people that I was right. I mean, this is what's been happening for a long time. It's been happening for a long time. They didn't even put down the numbers. They didn't used to put down the real numbers. I mean, you look at what's happened. You know, in the old days, they didn't mark down. They didn't say how many people were coming in. What we're doing is the gang members don't get in, and if they do get in, ICE is getting them out. The bad ones. We have a lot of bad ones, you know, that want to get in. And when you look at the caravans, they're composed of people that, I'm sorry, but they're not supposed to be coming into our country, and we're stopping it. But what we will be doing is, now our system is full, and I told our people today, our system is full. We can't take any more. The asylum is being scammed, the whole asylum system. And you have gang members, tough people, saying they're afraid to be in their country. They're not afraid. And then they'll come up with flags. They're holding flags from their country.
Griff, really well done. What was your big takeaway being there?
My big takeaway is that the president's committed to doing what these Border Patrol chiefs from coast to coast want most, and that is not only to build a wall, but to force Washington, Democrats and Republicans, to roll up their sleeves and try and do something about these loopholes, the catch and release, because that is the central driving magnet that these people are coming from, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And until you do both, build a wall and close these loopholes, it's not going to get better until you do that. And the president's fully committed to doing that, although he did say, I said, look, how about a summit? Bring these countries together. Yeah. He said, we don't need it.
I kind of liked that answer, honestly. I feel like these summits don't do anything half the time, so I kind of like that. Were you satisfied, though, Griff, with his answer about the tariffs when you said, you know, I don't know that you'll be able, he said, I could put tariffs, and he said, well, I don't know that you'll be able to do that because of the agreement. Were you satisfied with his response?
Well, no, and it's going to play out. He said, look, it's not a done deal, but it does in some ways undermine his own trade agreement, because under the USMCA, which is a new NAFTA deal, there's a specific provision that you cannot tax the first 2.6 million on new cars coming from Mexico. So that's a wrinkle he'll have to work out.
Very interesting. You know, the country is full, he said. He talked about they bring their flags, they don't bring their best. Ultimately, amnesty laws. And I thought your question about, is there another DACA coming, is an important one. You bring kids here, they're not responsible for that. What is their status going forward? A very important question.
We'll get into that, and I can't wait till later to tell you what he had to say about Biden.
There's more of that, right? Well, so speaking of Joe Biden, former vice president, he was in Washington, D.C. yesterday talking to a labor union. Of course, he's been in the news for all the wrong reasons from his perspective over the last week. And he referred to, or at least alluded to, the accusations that have been made against him. Here's part of what Joe Biden said, joking about it, yesterday. Watch.
I just want you to know I had permission to hug Lonnie. We had permission. By the way, he gave me permission to touch him.
So, listen, he's got to address it some way, and this is part of the way he did. Now, he went on to talk about how he's not going to apologize for the behavior he's had for years. Listen.
It wasn't my intent to make light of anyone's discomfort. I realize my responsibility is to not invade the space of anyone who is uncomfortable in that regard. And I hope it wasn't taken that way. I'm sorry I didn't understand more. I'm not sorry for any of my intentions. I'm not sorry for anything that I have ever done. I've never been disrespectful intentionally to a man or a woman. That's not the reputation I had since I was in high school, for God's sake.
Sorry, not sorry.
Right. Now, this footage was actually after the event because some people were saying, listen, you said you released this video on Twitter. You say you're going to be more mindful, more respectful, and then you went into the conference and cracked a couple of jokes. Was that really necessarily the best way to address this? So that's the question. How seriously does he need to respond? He came out. I thought what he released on Twitter was actually quite good and seemed quite authentic to me. I don't know that making a joke about it so soon after, particularly the second joke, he cracks one joke about a gentleman, and then he makes a secondary joke about a child that kind of sits out a little uncomfortably for me. When you talk about children, whenever you're making a joke about touching children, that does not resonate well with a number of people. So I think the question is, you now have, I think, upwards of 7 people who have come out and said, Joe Biden touched me in a way that made me feel uncomfortable, that was inappropriate. Is he held accountable? Is he held to the same standard that, for example, Kavanaugh was held to, where you had this very public hearing for uncorroborated, unsubstantiated allegations, and is there a moral relativism?
I think it's his only approach to say, I'm not going to apologize. That's your only play here. So in that sense, I think he's on to the right approach from his perspective.
Maybe.
The question is, does he fully understand what he did wrong? Because that certainly shows he doesn't understand it, and it's going to impact the 2020 Democrats.
We've got more of your interview later on in the show.
We do. More interviews coming, plus 2020 Democrats stepping up their attacks on President Trump.
A president today who is a racist, who is a sexist.
President Trump is tearing the moral fabric of this country apart.
But will the anti-Trump tirades backfire? That's coming up next.
Blame it on me.
President today who is a racist, who is a sexist.
What you did in this last election, Nan, we cut our time in hell in half.
The truth is, President Trump is tearing the moral fabric of this country apart.
That's just a portion of Democrats at Al Sharpton's convention going nuclear, making trashing the president a top priority on the trail. But will this actually backfire instead of improving their chances in 2020? Here to weigh in is Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Tom, thanks. Good morning. Thanks for being with us. You can predict this coming from an Al Sharpton conference, but is it what's going to serve them best in trying to beat this president?
Well, I mean, you got to separate. I mean, they're all running in a Democratic primary. It's not going to hurt them in a Democratic primary. In fact, they're tripping over themselves to bash the president. You just had Beto O'Rourke on the trail yesterday saying, or day before yesterday, saying that the president was similar to the Third Reich. So he's a Nazi, he's a racist, et cetera, et cetera. That is going to fire up their base. It won't do them any harm. But as you move into a general election setting, the nominee of the Democratic Party is going to have to take on the president. And how do those attacks resonate with, again, independents, middle of the country? Democrats are going to turn out to vote. We know that. Republican base is solid with President Trump. And so the question is, how are these attacks going to resonate with the independents and with sort of the squishy Republicans who may not like President Trump's style, but they look at his policies and they think, hey, the economy's pretty good. And I think that's where Democrats are really going to face the challenge, because they have to compete. Bashing Trump is not going to be enough to win in 2020. They've got to have a policy. They've got to have an agenda.
Does this prevent them from laying forward a positive agenda? And how do they lay that forward? If you're talking about the working man or the working class or someone left behind, and then you look at the jobs numbers of this president, how does that narrative stick for them?
Well, that's the biggest challenge, right? I mean, they've got to continually keep their base fired up, because that's a necessary requirement of 2020, but they also have to win over the independents in states that are going to matter, the Rust Belt states, and that's where the challenge lies. And believe me, if the agenda is solely bashing President Trump, it's not going to work. But even beyond that, the challenge is, contrasting with President Trump, a great economy, and they're going to be proposing things like a Green New Deal and other things. It's going to be a challenge for Democrats in 2020
but
for
Tom,
sure.
I mean, coming out of the primary, if you're talking about a Green New Deal, if you're talking about reparations, if you're talking about abolishing ICE, and those are planks in what you're talking about, How do you pivot to the general election and bring in that audience they'll need eventually?
Well, this is how our process works, and the Democrats are going to have to nominate someone who has the political skill to leave some of the harsher rhetoric and the sharper edges of some of those policy debates behind, and then pivot and say, look, they're promoting an agenda that is for the working class. And whether that is authentic, whether that is real, and how it compares to what President Trump is offering is the question of 2020. I think it's going to be, and it's going to be fought in basically 7 states, but most of them are in the Midwest, Ohio, and where I'm at right now.
Boy, that's a two-step. And if you can do that two-step, then you have a chance of being President of the United States. If you can't, President Trump could have a good opportunity in 2020. We'll see. Tom Bevan, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right, Pete, thank you.
You got it. All right, well, Trump vowing action on the southern border as Democrats deny there's even a crisis. Well, now even a DACA recipient sounding the alarm and says the president is right. He joins us coming up next. Welcome back. Well, 3 quick headlines for you. The Trump administration is reportedly expected to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group. It would be the first time the U.S. labels another country's military a terror organization. The announcement could come as soon as Monday. The administration has not yet commented. Good stuff. And more than 100 people remember a 10-year-old girl killed in an apparent road rage shooting. Summer Brown was shot outside her family's home in Arizona.
Wake up from getting hit and just gasping, and then she just like shaking. We couldn't save her.
Wow. Police say Joshua Gonzalez followed the family after their vehicle was cut him off and opened fire. He's being held on $1 million bond. And in college basketball, the stage is set for the Final Four in Minneapolis tonight. Auburn taking its first ever trip to the finals, facing Virginia at 6:09 Eastern. Right after that, Michigan State tips off against Texas Tech in Minneapolis. Good stuff tonight. Jet, down to you.
Thanks, Pete. Well, President Trump sounding the alarm on the nation's immigration crisis during a trip to the U.S.-Mexico border. And our next guest agrees.
Hilario Yanez is a DACA recipient and says it's time for Democrats to get on board. Hilario, good morning.
Welcome.
I was just out in California.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. I was just out in California with the president. What do you make of the president's job? How's he doing handling this border issue?
Well, the president has done an unbelievable job of bringing this issue to the American people. More and more Americans are realizing there is a crisis happening. Unfortunately, Congress and Democrats seem to ignore what's really happening down at the south of the border. If I can add just real quickly, there's a humanitarian crisis happening that's causing a border security crisis that is driven by a policy crisis. Congress must act and work with the president to fix this once and for all. And unfortunately, they seem to ignore this issue. But I always say this, it takes 2 to tango, and I think there's a perfect opportunity to fix border security in exchange for a dreamer solution, and I think that's what we need to lead on.
You know, Hilario, the president is often labeled anti-immigrant when he addresses this border security. And immigration is conflated, right? You have legal immigration and illegal immigration that is often conflated by folks on the left who just want to label him as anti-immigrant. As a DACA recipient, what is your response to labeling the president anti-immigrant?
Well, you know, the president, in terms of DACA community, he is compassionate towards the dreamers. He has proposed solutions to fix this once and for all. I think what you're seeing, the president is, he is for immigration. He is for legal immigration. I think he cares very much so about the American people. And I think he wants to fix this broken immigration problem. But unfortunately, Congress and Democrats don't want to work with him, and it's sad because it's putting the American people and also the dreamers in jeopardy.
Hilario, Hispanic support for President Trump is growing. If you look at the polls, 45% in February, in March, 50%.
Yeah.
Why? Why is he growing?
Well, I'm surprised it's not at 100%, and here's why. The Hispanic community values faith, family, and freedom. There is no other president or other party fighting for these values. When I look at the Democratic Party, they're against these values. They proudly and loudly lead on abortion, removing God from our lives, and also bringing socialism to our country. You know, we as Hispanics, we must stand united in our values. We must vote and represent those that are fighting for these values, and that is our president. That is the Republican Party. You know, we have great organizations like the RNC, like the RNHA, Lexit, and Benvenidos that are coming and welcoming Hispanics with open arms. And so I always tell the Hispanic community, don't vote on your emotions, vote on your values, and you'll see that the president and this party is the right choice.
You know, some argue that the Hispanic community does not support border security or are not advocates for border security. And when I speak to members of the Hispanic community, I find quite the opposite. They live in this country. They want their children to be safe. They care about human trafficking. They care about drug trafficking. Do you find it kind of insulting that people immediately, oftentimes on the left, will say, well, this is not an issue that's important to the Hispanic community, the issue of border security?
Well, the Democratic Party, when it comes to reaching out to the immigration community or to the Hispanic community, they lead on immigration and try to sell you that, you know, the Republican Party are against it. No, the Republican Party and this president is for immigration, but at the same time, we need to have sovereignty in this country. At the same time, we need to also protect the migrants who make this long and dangerous journey, who are constantly being under attack against drug cartels and human trafficking. So we're trying to do everything in our power. We're just asking Democrats to come to the table and help and work with this president and bring certainty to the American people and to the dreamers as well.
Very good point, Ilario. We'll see if that happens. Ilario Llanes, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, next, more with my interview with President Donald Trump as he responds to recent criticism from possible 2020 opponent Joe Biden.
My eyes and ears down here. You don't have to.
We were in California, though. Some argue perhaps leaning towards the more liberal side of things. You know, listen, here was the thing. When I was talking to President Trump and we had to talk about the border, I had to get in a question about Biden. The rhetoric is escalating between President Trump and former Vice President Biden. Here is what he really thinks about the former Vice President. Listen.
Vice President Biden seems to be escalating words with you, first on Twitter, and now he said that you're a tragedy in 2 acts. Your reaction?
Well, we have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have the best job numbers we've ever had. More people are working today in the United States than ever before. They're paying less tax than just about ever before. We have the biggest tax cut in the history of our country. The regulations are cut lower than they've ever been. I mean, we've done more regulation cutting than any administration, whether it's 4 years or 8 years. This country is doing well. We're rocking. The military is taken care of. The vets are in the best shape they've ever been in. We have choice now for the vets, which they've been trying to get, as you know, for 45 years unsuccessfully. And, you know, to him, I just, hey, part of the reason I'm here is because of him and President Obama. If they did a good job, I probably wouldn't be president. What else do you have to say?
All right, Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You do a great job.
Thank you much. I appreciate being on the border. I have to ask you, I know you get asked every day, one final question, that is, are we any closer to seeing the Mueller report? So much made of it. There's now critics of your Attorney General.
You know, there's no collusion, okay, the famous word collusion. There's no obstruction because they put a decision and the Attorney General made the decision. He said no obstruction. So there's no collusion. There's no obstruction. There's no nothing. It's all a big hoax. And the Democrats want to keep playing it because they've done a lousy job. They haven't governed well. Again, that's why I'm here. The way they governed is the reason that I'm president. And we are doing a great job. So it's really up to the Attorney General, whatever he wants to do. But everybody waited for the Mueller report. Then it turns out that there's no obstruction, no collusion, no anything. And now the rest is up to the Attorney General. Schiff and Nadler, they keep playing their games. They can't get off it. And they were very disappointed, but it was a very easy decision. And these were not people that liked Donald Trump. I called them the 13 angry Democrats. These were people that were angry. They should have never been allowed to write about me. These were 13 angry people with hatred toward me. And then they added more, 17 or 18. And they all were angry at Donald Trump. And they still came up with no collusion. Very few people could that happen to, where they go through almost 2 years of nonsense, haters, total haters, and they come up with no collusion? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
All right, so then I finally did stop talking after the second handshake.
Second handshake.
It's a classic Griff move.
Well,
you just said it. Shake the hand. Thank you very much.
Yep.
One more question.
By the way.
We had to get that in there. But, you know, the Biden comments were very fascinating because it's a very honest answer. He says, look, I might not have been here, but for President Obama and Vice President Biden had done better in trying to achieve the things the American people wanted.
That may be my favorite answer that he has ever given to a question, because he didn't make it personal. He could have come out and made a sarcastic remark or made it personal to Biden, but instead he went through his entire record. He talked about the economy, he talked about the deregulation, he went right to policy, and he said, look, this is the stuff I've done that works, and if you guys had been doing this kind of stuff, maybe I wouldn't have gotten elected because your policy would have actually worked. It was actually a home run, I thought, that answer.
It's a great point. If the Democrats want to go to the gutter and call him names, which we saw them do yesterday and we keep seeing them do, and he keeps pointing back at policy. Yeah. He even talked about vets and veterans' choice, rebuilding the military, crushing ISIS, renegotiating deals that have been terrible for America. It's really tough to argue against that. So they're going to want to pull him into the gutter, and the longer he stays on those issues, he's shooting from the high ground.
And he does go into the gutter. Sometimes he does wander down there, but it's a good lesson for him too to observe. Sometimes you have to kind of observe yourself, and if you see that and you see, wait a minute, that actually works a lot better than climbing down into the gutter with them. It does.
Both work. Like he's a better counterpuncher and gutter fighter than they are, and he's got the power.
Guess what? We're not done. I've got more of that interview coming up a little later.
We're coming up. We got some headlines for you first, though. New body camera video shows the intense moments of a deadly hostage standoff in Georgia as 2 officers are hurt in the crossfire. Wow. 1 officer shot in the hand, another shot in the chest, desperately escaping through the garage. They are expected to recover. Police say Anthony Bailey killed his 8-month pregnant girlfriend and her teenage son before taking his own life. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid loses his civil lawsuit over injuries from an exercise band. The jury only taking an hour to side with the maker of the resistance band that says Reid misused the product. Reid blamed the band for his serious injuries, including blindness in one eye. A judge stops a New York county from banning unvaccinated minors from public places amid a measles breakout. The judge says Rockland County's 166 measles cases do not amount to an epidemic. The county says this is the longest running outbreak in nearly 20 years. Another hearing is scheduled later this month. And for the 3rd straight year, President Trump decides not to attend the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner.
The dinner is so boring and so negative that we're going to hold a very positive rally, and the Correspondents' Dinner is too negative. I like positive things.
I'm with him on that. It's unclear where the rally will be. The dinner is April 27th, and those are your headlines.
Good move.
Good move. I would be doing the same. But Nerd Prom is not for me.
It will be interesting, too, because the MC, I believe, is a historian. But
yeah, no comedian this year, so I'm told. Adam Klotz has our weather for us.
Tell us it's getting warmer.
Moonlights as a comedian.
Yeah, I do. I do have a lot of jokes. I'm going to save those, though, and I'll focus on the forecast. Warming up here on the East Coast, and I know you like that. There's still a lot of warm air also in the middle of the country. Unfortunately for some of those folks, that warm air is going to be fueling perhaps some big storms before the day is over with. You're looking at kind of that bubble of warm air. 50 degrees currently in Kansas City. That feels nice. Big storms, though, moving across portions of Texas. This is the system that folks are going to be paying attention to, tracking over the course of today. Not so bad. It's still early in the morning, but as we get going eventually into the afternoon, that's when this becomes more of a serious situation. So eastern Texas, stretching into portions of northern Louisiana, all areas to be paying attention to as this sweeps across the country. And then that warm air for everybody else. Take a look at these highs on the day. 73 in Kansas City, 67 degrees in here in New York City, 66 degrees in Chicago. Warm air here for the weekend. Going to be looking pretty good, guys.
Music to my ears.
I'm happy to see that. Yeah, for sure. Adam, thanks a lot. Appreciate
Thanks, Adam.
Good stuff. All right, well, the left still clinging to the idea that President Trump colluded with Russia. They're collusion clingers. They don't have any evidence, but why? Our next guest says it's because they can't admit.
Quick headlines for you. Maryland could soon raise the age to buy tobacco products from 18 to 21, but the measure exempts members of the military. State lawmakers passed a bill targeting the sale of cigarettes, cigars, smokeless tobacco, and vaping devices. If the governor signs the bill, it will take effect in October. And a bill in Minnesota would give driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. The Democrat-led House passing the measure, saying all immigrants are essential to communities. Critics say it encourages illegal behavior. The bill now goes to the Republican-held Senate.
Pete. Thanks, Griff. And no voter ID law on the books in Minnesota. So there you go. All right, many on the left still clinging to the Trump collusion narrative, despite the lack of evidence so far from the Mueller report.
And the media may be to blame, as some headlines this week pushed a continuation of the story.
The New York Times headline read, "Some of Mueller's team say report was more damaging than Barr revealed." Another headline says, quote, "Limited information frustrated some on the Mueller's team."
Here to weigh in is James Freeman, assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page and a Fox News contributor. Welcome, James.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So what do you make of the media's role at this stage of the game?
Disappointing and kind of surprising. I mean, I think we've all had an experience when you have a source that doesn't give you the straight story. It generally makes you angry. I mean, if there's a good faith effort, maybe you forgive them. But this basically 2 years of building up this story, and we get to the end, and there's no collusion. And you would think there would be some maybe introspection on the part of the press, humility, trying to make it right, and they're kind of clinging to the narrative.
Just quickly, do you anticipate any change? Say the full report comes out, verifies what Barr has said. Is this just going to continue, this behavior?
Well, I think certainly people who want to cling to the belief in collusion, or they like that message politically, will look for items in the report that they can quote. But I think the statement from Barr was very direct. No, and it was quoting Mueller. Not just no collusion, no coordination between the Trump campaign, Team Trump, and the Russians. I don't know how it can be any more straightforward.
They're starting to impugn the motive. You talk about good faith. They're impugning the motives of the AG. This is Representative Hank Johnson, Democrat from Georgia. He said AG Barr may have obstructed justice. If it turns out that he has obstructed justice by how he handled the Mueller report, that will be a deep stain on his legacy. So they're going after Barr and the way he characterized the report.
Yeah, that's not obstruction. This is absurd. The obstruction is destroying evidence, intimidating witnesses. The fact that Barr does not agree with them that there is obstruction or collusion is not obstruction. He is our duly appointed and Senate-confirmed Attorney General. The Justice Department makes charging decisions. We have a constitutional system where the president runs our justice system. He is the executive branch, I should say, the Justice Department. I think people like to pretend that it's independent, or maybe they just want certain results. But this claim of obstruction on the part of Barr is just absurd.
Wouldn't it have been odd for Barr to mischaracterize the report, knowing full well that more details are going to come out? And then, I mean, that would ruin his entire legacy, his entire credibility. Doesn't that seem like an odd move for him?
Well, it's not just extremely hard to believe on its own merits, but the idea that he would mislead or lie about what was in the report and nobody involved would say anything.
Right.
Wouldn't Mueller, for example, want to say something now if
is he not talking to the Mueller team as it pertains to redactions? I mean, we know they're working hand in hand to make sure that whatever isn't released is done so for the right reason.
And people should know, and they probably do, that some of this material, grand jury testimony, it's illegal to disclose it. There are various reasons. Of course, there are issues of intelligence, sources, and methods. There can be lots of reasons why the full report should not be out there. You don't want to put out allegations that are not leading to some kind of charge. The Justice Department isn't sort of in the business of randomly smearing people that it's not charging. And so there are lots of good reasons, and that's why the law does not require the full set of allegations to come out. What it requires is the report that Barr has made.
If only it was about the law, James.
Well, there you go.
Thanks so much.
James Freeman, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
All right, well, freedom of religion is supposed to be a right of everyone in this country. So why were some in the media so concerned when Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this?
To see the remarkable history of the faith in this place and the work that our administration has done to make sure that this democracy in the Middle East of this Jewish state remains, I'm confident that the Lord is at work here.
Pastor Robert Jeffress tells us why Mike Pompeo's Christian faith is under fire next.
Welcome back. Well, 3 quick headlines for you. The Trump administration is reportedly expected to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group. It would be the first time the U.S. labels another country's military a terror organization. The announcement could come as soon as Monday. The administration has not yet commented. Good stuff. And more than 100 people remember a 10-year-old girl killed in an apparent road rage shooting. Summer Brown was shot outside her family's home in Arizona.
Wake up from getting hit and just gasping, and then she just like shaking. We couldn't save her.
Wow. Police say Joshua Gonzalez followed the family after their vehicle was cut him off and opened fire. He's being held on $1 million bond. And in college basketball, the stage is set for the Final Four in Minneapolis tonight. Auburn taking its first ever trip to the finals, facing Virginia at 6:09 Eastern. Right after that, Michigan State tips off against Texas Tech in Minneapolis. Good stuff tonight. Jed, down to you.
Thanks, Pete. Well, President Trump sounding the alarm on the nation's immigration crisis during a trip to the U.S.-Mexico border. And our next guest agrees.
Hilario Yanez is a DACA recipient and says it's time for Democrats to get on board. Hilario, good morning.
Welcome.
I was just out in California.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. I was just out in California with the president. What do you make of the president's job? How's he doing handling this border issue?
Well, the president has done an unbelievable job of bringing this issue to the American people. More and more Americans are realizing there is a crisis happening. Unfortunately, Congress and Democrats seem to ignore what's really happening down at the south of the border. If I can add just real quickly, there's a humanitarian crisis happening that's causing a border security crisis that is driven by a policy crisis. Congress must act and work with the president to fix this once and for all. And unfortunately, they seem to ignore this issue. But I always say this, it takes two to tango, and I think there's a perfect opportunity to fix border security in exchange for a dreamer solution, and I think that's what we need to lead on.
You know, Hilario, the president is often labeled anti-immigrant when he addresses this border security. And immigration is conflated, right? You have legal immigration and illegal immigration that is often conflated by folks on the left who just want to label him as anti-immigrant. As a DACA recipient, what is your response to labeling the president anti-immigrant?
Well, you know, the president, in terms of DACA community, he is compassionate towards the dreamers. He has proposed solutions to fix this once and for all. I think what you're seeing, the president is, he is for immigration. He is for legal immigration. I think he cares very much so about the American people. And I think he wants to fix this broken immigration problem. But unfortunately, Congress and Democrats don't want to work with him, and it's sad because it's putting the American people and also the dreamers in jeopardy.
Hilario, Hispanic support for President Trump is growing. If you look at the polls, 45% in February, in March, 50%.
Yeah.
Why? Why is he growing?
Well, I'm surprised it's not at 100%, and here's why. The Hispanic community values faith, family, and freedom. There is no other president or other party fighting for these values. When I look at the Democratic Party, they're against these values. They proudly and loudly lead on abortion, removing God from our lives, and also bringing socialism to our country. You know, we as Hispanics, we must stand united in our values. We must vote and represent those that are fighting for these values, and that is our president. That is the Republican Party. You know, we have great organizations like the RNC, like the RNHA, Lexit, and Benvenidos that are coming and welcoming Hispanics with open arms. And so I always tell the Hispanic community, don't vote on your emotions, vote on your values, and you'll see that the president and this party is the right choice.
You know, some argue that the Hispanic community does not support border security or are not advocates for border security. And when I speak to members of the Hispanic community, I find quite the opposite. They live in this country. They want their children to be safe. They care about human trafficking. They care about drug trafficking. Do you find it kind of insulting that people immediately, oftentimes on the left, will say, well, this is not an issue that's important to the Hispanic community, the issue of border security?
Well, the Democratic Party, when it comes to reaching out to the immigration community or to the Hispanic community, they lead on immigration and try to sell you that, you know, the Republican Party are against it. No, the Republican Party and this president is for immigration, but at the same time, we need to have sovereignty in this country. At the same time, we need to also protect the migrants who make this long and dangerous journey, who are constantly being under attack against drug cartels and human trafficking. So we're trying to do everything in our power. We're just asking Democrats to come to the table and help and work with this president and bring certainty to the American people and to the dreamers as well.
Very good point, Ilario. We'll see if that happens. Ilario Llanes, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, next, more with my interview with President Donald Trump as he responds to recent criticism from possible 2020 opponent Joe Biden.